never had boundaries in my life. I didn't really have values, not that I knew about. And when you're that kind of person who is a huge overworker, overachiever, you're very much a people pleaser. You're looking for all of your validation outside of yourself because you've been taught that your self-worth is based on what other people decide it is.
Hey there. Welcome to the Genies Project, a space where transformation is about becoming, not performing. Because self-development isn't about fixing yourself. It's about freeing yourself. Freeing yourself from expectations that don't fit, from stories that were never yours to carry, from rules that keep you from living fully, unapologetically like yourself. Each week, you'll hear real conversations, practical tools, and unfiltered truths, all designed to make self-growth feel natural and not like another impossible standard. This isn't just another self-help podcast. It's a movement, a space where we stop waiting for permission and start living life our way. So, why wait for 3 wishes when you can start freeing your genie one step at a time? Let's go. So today's guest and today's conversation is very dear to my heart because this person really embodies the messy magic of becoming. Ronni Hill is a really dear friend and colleague of mine. She is a professional multi-hyphenate, creative coach, and her podcast is called A Life Differently and is one of the many things that inspired me to create this space. But more than her titles, it's her presence and her truth-telling, that tenderness that she has that I believe makes her stand out. And so in this conversation, we really just go in and talk about what it really means to unlearn hustle culture and reclaim your energy, as well as reimagining rest. Not as a vague concept and this thing that we know we have to do, but as an actual practice. We go a little bit into exploring grief, identity shifts, and how healing is actually less about arrival and more about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. So sit down, take a deep breath, feel your body in contact with your clothes, with the floor, with the world, and come join us for this conversation of life and in-betweens. Welcome to the Genies Project.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you for being
Congratulations.
here with me. Thanks.
Absolutely.
I just want to let people know a little bit about you. And before I go into the bio, I just want to say I've met this human at the Wholehearted Coaching Certification with Shirin Skandani. And she was my first person that I had to peer coach. And here we are happily ever after, making 2 different podcasts and talking about very important shit in a lighthearted way. So this human that you're about to hear from created this beautiful project called A Life Differently to explore what happens when we stop following the script and start living on our own terms. So you can kind of tell why this bitch is here. Very similar philosophies, but if you need more credentials, like why should I listen? She is a trauma-informed certified life coach, podcast host of A Life Differently. She has a journalism and mass communications degree, aka, in her words, professional overachiever, remote entrepreneur for 7+ years, podcast producer for 5+ years, and professional multi-hyphenate. So if you are also kind of dabbling in a lot of stuff, this might be a good conversation for you to tune into. She's also a 1-3 manifesting generator for those who speak this language. She is passionate about advocating for breaking generational cycles and super talented, creative, learning to honor her energy cycles and work seasonally. So fuck yes. Hello.
Damn. Hi. Oh my gosh.
How does it feel to hear that out loud from somebody else?
Surprising. I'm like, damn, who is this? I have to take it in. I have to take it in for a moment because although I know that like I wrote that and I've lived that, it is such a different thing hearing it said back to you. And for me, definitely, we talk about that high achieving perfectionist, blah 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 blah. What do you call it? Recovering perfectionist. Man, that external validation has always been so important to me. So it hits me when people say it, especially when certain people say it, like you.
Well, take it in because that's you.
Oh, it's crazy.
I did not write that, but I do stand by it 1,000% because I've seen you. So yes, this is Ronni Hill. She, her superstar, according to her guest submission form, and I love it. You know, I thought I was edgy doing the she, her, ella, and like reclaiming my Hispanic, but I'm like superstar.
Edgy in our own ways, definitely.
Yes, it's like a little twist to the norms, or I mean, at this point, things that people want to take away
Yeah.
from being norms, which is mega fucked. But we are not going to get into that just now. Yeah, I want to start by saying why I wanted to have you on this show. I just think you have such a beautiful story of really coming to yourself and working actively to come to yourself. You know, a lot of us, when we start this journey, right, we start with comparison and contrast, and we see like all these things in these wonderful, not so wonderful platforms that we use, and it's like, oh my God, I would love to be there.
Yeah.
And then we bring ourselves down, or we think that, you know, Cinderella's godmother's going to come and give us like a magic wand and the Powerball will be here and that's going to solve all of our problems and we're going to become like completely badass, unapologetic, whatever, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is a lot less glamorous than that.
A lot less.
I just love that you've been tackling this shit from a real person's standpoint. And that is so rare to find, not only as individuals, but also in the world that we consume. Like, I mean, you and I were talking about Duolingo making fun of that video with the 3 a.m., wake up, take out the mouth tape, put the face in the eyes. And it's like, this is the shit that we have been consuming. And this is what we eventually think that self-growth and self-development and like reaching our pinnacle looks like.
Right.
But
no.
So,
No.
You know, you were talking about in the form, because for all of you that don't know, like every time I have somebody in, aka this being the first time I have somebody in, like I get people to fill out this form so we can figure out like what is this conversation river gonna look like. One of the questions was like, okay, tell me about your journey. You know, very simple, very to the point questions of mine. And you said that you were dancing in this portion of feeling like you're in the before part of the journey and the during part of the journey. And I think that's where I want to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved how your questions were very like straight and to the point. And then I was like, oh, this is Vanessa. This is Nane. I'm just going to tell her my entire life story. I'm just going to vent to her in this form. And my plan was to go back and edit. And I was just like, fuck it. I was just going to leave it.
I love it. I love it because that's how it goes, right? Like,
yeah.
In order to get to the edited version, you have to go through the messy.
You have to.
And so
absolutely.
I appreciate that you did not edit.
And I love what you said. I'm going to piggyback off of that because I think that's such a great way to kind of explain what I mean about that, really straddling the before and during. Going back to the example of, I'm not going to assume, but there is this fitness influencer who made this morning routine video that is just gone viral and everyone is like piggybacked off of it, but it's really crazy to say the least, where he's like, he starts his day at 3 a.m. and like I think by 6 a.m. he secured like some $10,000 deal and done every single thing he needs to do for the day. So it's a really crazy video. But thinking about that, we've been told that that's kind of how this success and work needs to look in this mindset field, and we're always focusing on getting there, and I think that's where I was kind of coming from when I said I feel like I'm straddling the before and the during, because I don't feel like I've gotten there, but simultaneously I'm trying to remind myself that there doesn't really exist, that the during is literally just here, and that's the main thing that matters. So when I talk about kind of straddling the, I'm surprised I'm using that word because I've never used it and it sounds very sensual, and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah,
Anyways, that's where my mind went.
I love it because you've said it like 3 times now, and every time, like, in my mind, I just see like a pole conditioning exercise. I just see myself like straddling on the floor, trying to touch like my hands to the floor. And
Yeah.
I'm like, is this my sign to work on conditioning
Oh
today
my
after this
gosh.
interview?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I think that visual is so great because it feels like that workout, that conditioning, it's a work in progress. And I feel that it's always a work in progress. But also you have to remind yourself that you don't always have to be doing the work like actively, that you also need to enjoy the here. Like, where am I right now? And how can I allow myself to just be who I am in this very moment and allow that to be good enough, while also honoring that part of me that wants to keep learning and wants to keep growing and wants to keep getting better, So that's kind of what I think I mean when I say I'm kind of straddling that before and during.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think that portion of like, you don't have to always be doing, like, you can just be.
Right.
It's basically everything that's missing from mainstream Instagram self coach BSBS.
Yeah. Totally agree.
It's always like hustle, hustle, go, go, dale, dale, vamos, vamos. And then you're like, and my melatonin, like, where's my pillow?
Right. Right.
And so I just think you said it so exquisitely, because it's about this and that, right?
Yeah.
For me, like, life is like this staircase, like this spiral shape.
Yeah.
So you're always transitioning the same things in just like different arenas, right? So
Yeah.
your before right now was at some point your after.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
now that it's not, now that you've moved past it, it's your before and you're in a different stage. And so everything's always fucking moving. How can we make peace with us while everything like flows in and out of our context?
Exactly. Exactly. And I love that you use that metaphor of the spiral staircase. I think ever since you first kind of like introduced that to me, it's just really made so much more sense.
It's one of those things that it's really hard to put into words. Like, I feel like even when I put it into words, they're not going to land unless you've experienced at least one loop of the spiral
Yeah.
consciously.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's very beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
I know we've talked about this notion of learning to just be enough and good, just as we are. Very small task, no big deal over there. But when do you think we lose that? Because I don't think we come into this world not feeling good enough. Like, I was
My
a
God,
sassy
absolutely
little
not.
motherfucker.
Right.
I was very quiet, but I was very sassy. So it's, looking back, when do we lose the ability to just be who we are?
Yeah, that is such a great question and such a good point, because I mean, honestly, I don't recall my early years, but I've heard that I was a handful. So, which is hilarious because I mean, I feel like if you know me now, you're like, there's no way. And I'm like, yes, I've heard stories about myself. I honestly believe it definitely happens in childhood. So, one of the things I really, really love learning about and talking about is generational cycles. And there's so much of what's ingrained in us, so much of what we do that is literally just kind of fed to us from what's been done by everyone around us, by our family, by our parents, by their parents, so on and so forth. There's that aspect, and there's also science has also shared that we exist on this earth before we actually exist. And basically what that means is that when our grandmothers are pregnant with our mothers, that we exist within our mothers, as one of her eggs, like that's developed in the womb. So I really also love that thought of like, holy cow, like there's a piece of you that's here when your grandmother was pregnant with your mom. Like that's crazy. But then you have to think, when we talk about these teachings of generational cycles, and we mostly talk about it in a sense of trauma being passed down, but I do also want to start exploring, when like more positive things are passed down, but
Generational joy.
exactly, because we don't talk about that.
No. Well, but that's the thing.
Girl, I know. See, you told me to blurt it out, and I'm like, no, we gotta contain it, because you and I will just keep talking.
No.
I love that. I love
But
that.
here's the thing, like I think we really haven't had the time to explore the generational joy
Yes,
because we have so much generational trauma that
exactly,
we have to uncover before we get there. And not because you have to like heal before you joy, but because these things that we've been carrying for whenever, like you gave the science, I don't know what the name is, but in woo woo spirit world, energy never breaks. Energy
exactly,
just gets released and transformed and transmuted and it changes, but everything that is has been and will be in
exactly,
like one way or another. So it makes sense to me from my woo woo standpoint that we've existed before we existed.
exactly.
And therefore, like all of this shit that happened before us, like we are carrying it until somebody transmutes it into something different. So
Yeah.
it's trippy.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, even that right there, like what you just said, you're carrying that until someone transmutes it. And if we want to add it into this really big picture, that's what happens to us when we are children. We come into this world, and I don't believe any child comes into this world questioning their worth. Not at all. You're like, I'm fucking hungry. I deserve to eat. Please feed me. You come in and you're this very needing being, of course, but no one's questioning your worth. No one's saying like you don't need to eat. You don't deserve that. I think that somewhere as we get older, that threshold starts to lower, it starts to lessen. And then at some point, someone decides it's time for this child to be introduced to the real world. Like, hey, you don't just get stuff because you want it or because you cry or whatever. And at some point, you just start to learn that maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe, this thing I really want, I need to do something to earn it, or I need to be better to earn it. And it's not necessarily that someone is just saying you need to be better to get what you want. It's taught to us in so many different ways. And I personally like to attribute most of what we do to our home life, anyone, our parents, guardians, anyone around us who raises us, because the subconscious mind is pretty much formed by the time you're about 7 or 8 years old. And so, literally, from the beginning all the way up to that age, your subconscious mind is being formed. So, most of your foundational beliefs, your habits, your acts, all of those things are formed by that age. And your subconscious mind controls like over 90% of what you do on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So when you get to our big age, I'm like 35 years old, I have habits and stuff that really, if I sit down and look at it, they were formulated back when I was a child. They were instilled in me back then. And then the thing is that like we grow up and we're children. We don't realize that. We don't understand that. And even the people around us don't understand that. So no one even teaches you, hey, you kind of got to deal with this work. You got to deal, you got to heal yourself. You got to heal your inner child. You got to do your shadow work and blah, 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 blah. So then we become big adults who have upset, angry, sad, emotional 7, 8 year olds inside of us that are really operating our day to day actions, and we have no idea what to do with them.
There's three things I want to touch on.
Okay.
There was a point where you said, we come in being very needy beings. And in my mind, I'm like, yes, but not needy with the connotation that we give needy as adults, I feel like, honestly, it's not a bad thing to
Mm-hmm.
be needy.
Right.
What that means is just being attuned to the fact that you are alive, and to stay alive and satisfied and fulfilled, there are certain fucking things that you need,
Yeah.
and that's okay. And
Yeah.
it's okay that when you don't have them, you get to make big noises and big declarations on, like, motherfucker, why am I not being changed?
Yeah.
Why am I not being fed? Why
Right.
am I not being cuddled? Like,
Yeah. Like I need
hello,
that.
give it to me.
Yeah.
In the non-sensual way,
Yeah.
but also in the sensual way, because as we grow up, we kind of have
Right.
those
Right.
needs.
Right.
So that was like the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah.
The second thing that came to my mind is when we were talking about the concept that this state starts at home and that people don't realize it, right? I think we all know that we are shaping the minds of the youngsters, but we
Yeah.
don't really know to which degree. And
Yeah.
as the person being shaped, you also don't know what else is possible, because your world is so small in the beginning. And even though it expands, the core, the safety, in quote marks, because sometimes that environment is not safe, but it's what your brain knows, and therefore that's why it's safe. It's that nuclear core of whatever home life you have. And so if what you have there is not aligned with what you, as like a fully developed person, start to yearn, there's a lot of work that needs to get done to figure
Right.
out that it is possible to do something different.
Exactly.
I feel like all of that ties back to the whole like generational cycles, because a lot of what we don't think it's possible, it's also passed on to us. Like, what your family thinks is possible versus what my family thinks is possible might be two different things.
Yeah.
And then you add a family of a different background or of different like money capacities, and they're going to have a whole different idea of what they think is possible.
Right.
So all of these realities exist, and if we want to tap into bits and pieces of all of these realities, we kind of have to deconstruct ours, and that's a lot of fucking work.
It is. It is a lot of work. And then also, what I would love to tap onto, what you just said about what our families believe is possible, what our cultures believe is possible. This ties back into what we said about generational trauma and joy, that the very real reality of, systemic oppression, colonization, all of these things that, people of the global majority have had to face is another added layer to all of it. So I'm definitely not shitting on our generational pass down of like, you got to be this way to make it in this world. Listen, that's what our families had to experience. So
Thank you for that, because that was on my notes. I was like, oh, we gotta like talk straight, right? Like,
we have to.
things are not just like, okay, I'm gonna like work on myself and figure out like how I want to be different, and everything else is going to change. Like, we are still, unfortunately, living within a bigger set of beliefs in this world. For some of us, that's going to look way easier, depending, unfortunately, on money and a lot of intersectionalities. How do I say this? The more minority you are in the actual sense of the word minority, the more privileged you are. Because the global majority, which we think it's a minority in the societal scheme of things, is not a minority.
Right.
But it also carries like the shittier end of the stick from a societal like standpoint. And so those are things that we have to take into consideration, because when you and I do the work, it looks different. Within that difference, that's like the umbrella of, okay, yeah, it looks different for both of them, but it also looks very different from you and from me, because we are from different parts of the global majority.
Right.
So, like, thank you for pointing that out.
Absolutely.
Do you have any examples of things that you've had to actively deconstruct in your life And that now looking back, you're like, I am so glad that I took the time to untangle this and create something different.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I can think of two, like right off the top of my head. One of the biggest ones for me, I've definitely had to deconstruct what work looks like, what earning in this world looks like, and also rest. We've been touching on the concept of just being. So I'm gonna say those are like two that are coming to my mind right now. So the first one, work. Oh my God. This one has been really, really interesting for me because I feel really selfish and maybe self-centered, like egotistical saying it, but I know coming into this world that I was different, that I am different. I'm so different from my family in general. And you and I cannot talk about this work without talking about like why we said like systemic racism and colonization and da 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 da. Vanessa is Venezuelan. I'm Black and Samoan. So I grew up very much in Black communities of the rural South. I grew up in the country, and I grew up in like I would probably say very like low socioeconomic class. Eventually, kind of moved up a little bit to like middle class, something like that. But I grew up in my mom's house, and it was like me, my mom, one of my brothers, two of my mom's sisters, one of her brothers, her mom and her dad. Like, I slept in the room with like two other people. Everyone worked. We worked like manufacturing jobs. And, those kind of companies really thrive here in the South. I'm not going to get into that. But, anyways, so I mean, growing up in that environment, like you said, we believe we know what's possible for us based on what we see. So growing up, that's what I saw. And I even remember right now, I just had a quick flashback to like one of my old elementary drawings. Every year they would ask us like what we wanted to be when we grew up, and I remember one of mine was like I wanted to work at McDonald's. But like that's what I thought, and then like kind of over the years the only other things I thought were like, oh, I want to be a teacher or I want to be a librarian. That's what I saw. No one in my family worked those jobs, but I was in school, so I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, somebody's a teacher, someone's a librarian. I go to
Yeah,
McDonald's
somebody
all the
has to
time.
do this, like obviously
Right.
there's a job market that I
Right.
can tap into.
So, like, thinking about that, that's what I mean by like conditioning, and also the belief that what you see around you is what you believe is possible, usually. And even growing up, going to high school, I knew I didn't want to do any of the things that everyone around me was doing. Like I said, my family worked all manufacturing jobs. And then in high school, if you identified as female, I think that's maybe the best way to say it, but you had one or two options. You were either going to be a teacher or a nurse. Literally, I can tell you probably like everybody went to high school, I can tell you if they're a teacher or a nurse. And I was just like, yeah, I don't want to do that. So I went to college and I went undeclared, and I had no freaking idea like what I was going to do. But I remember learning in college, my RA at the time, which is like a resident assistant or whatever. She's like an upperclassman who,
Yeah.
monitors the hall.
It's like basically the summer camp supervisor that is also doing
Exactly.
all the fucked up shit that you're doing, but she's getting paid to do it and tell you not to do it.
Exactly. Like she has her own room and it's like really cool. But so she very much opened door policy. So literally she was right next to my room, but I saw her working on something super, super creative. And I was like, what are you doing? I was like, that an art project? And she's like, oh no, this is for my class. And she was in the public relations class. And she told me all about it. And my mind was just blown. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm like, you mean you're here taking classes for that? And you can do something with that? So after I talked to her, she told me she was in the School of Journalism and Mass Communications. I deep dived into it. I was like, oh, I'm going to do public relations. And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. But I basically, that opened up to me that I could do something different. And it's like my entire life, I knew I was different, but I was like, no, you're going to end up working like one of these basic jobs. I mean, no offense to anyone. Like I said, my parents worked those jobs, but I know that's not me. I know that that's not who I am. So
Yeah.
I had the longest degree title. So I have a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism and Mass Communications with a focus in visual communications. That's my title.
I love that. But you're talking about how your frame of reference expanded with one conversation.
Right.
And I think that is so powerful because in my framework, right, I have these four archetypes that we move through, and then we move through them again because life is a spiral. So we go from trap genie to curious genie, aligning genie, and then free genie, only to do it all over again. every time until we die. But that right there, that one conversation that opens your mind, that's the bridge between being a trapped genie and a curious genie. Because then that tells you, holy shit, like there's a lot of other stuff that's possible for me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you mentioned the bridge because we talked about this need for the bridge just in general because there is such a huge gap between where we are right now and where we want to be or a dream that we have, and it's just like how do we build that bridge? Where does the bridge come in? But you're absolutely right. That bridge moment, oh my gosh. Sorry, I need to I need to sit with it because that's just been kind of like a recurring like synchronicity I've been having. So the bridge moment is absolutely so important and so necessary. And the thing is that like, we don't know when it's going to come. My moment didn't come until I was in college. I was a freshman, so I had to be like 18. But even then, it's not like that just changed everything because I still have all of that 18 plus years of conditioning to kind of work through. But I did eventually shift my major. I went into the major and it was amazing. It was fun and it reawakened a lot of these things about myself. I was like, this makes sense. I was like, this would be the route I would go if I wanted to work in magazines. And the connection with that is that I fucking love magazines. Like in high school, that was my thing. Atusa Rubinstein was the editor in chief of 17 magazine, and I was obsessed with her in college. And I just remember I would just always read her story, and I think I even emailed her once, and she responded back. And I just remember being so psyched about that email. And it's like, see, even right now talking to you, like that little bridge, that moment, it just reignites something in you. So, so yeah, that just really like awakened so much in me. But I will say that there was still so much work that I needed to do because I still was dealing with a lot of what work was supposed to look like and also my worth. In college, I did so much. I was a full-time student. I had an internship. I had a job. Listen.
Well, but we can also like argue that you were doing all of those things partly because of what we've been taught, like right generationally, that this whole like work hard, earn it, whatever, and
Exactly.
society. Like not everybody has the money to go and like go to school and just like enjoy the school experience in the
Right.
US.
Right.
You
Right.
know, so
Right.
some of us don't have a choice. You have to
Right.
go full time and
Because we're not going to
work and
talk about
like
student loans, okay?
I'm very fortunate that I was able to come to school debt free
Yeah.
and get a bunch of scholarships in here. But holy shit, the amount of debt that you get into going to school here as a
Yeah.
normal human, if your family does not have a trust fund that is sizable, your college experience is going to look a lot different than Gossip Girl. And that is something that my like 20-year-old self really needs to hear right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the
Absolutely.
expectations and the reality is like ordering from Wish.
Absolutely.
It's great, but it's gonna come with some cosmetic defects.
Absolutely. I feel like I also like no knock at your show at all. I know my dad's probably never going to listen to this. He doesn't listen to podcasts, but a huge shout out to my dad who really made a lot of the payments that I needed to make to at least go to school. Like I had some scholarships, I had some financial aid, but my dad really made those. You absolutely have to pay this in order to go to school, and like my dad came through. So I
Fuck
mean,
yeah.
huge shout out to my dad. Okay,
As he needs it, because that shit, it takes a village to
it
send
does. It
somebody to
really does.
college. Like for me, it was my mom, my dad, my aunt, and we've been taught that life right now is like wake up at 3 a.m. and I'm gonna do all of these things. I'm sorry, dude. You're probably like a good
That
guy,
guy,
like
like,
that
oh my
just like
gosh.
makes content, but like it's just the example that lives rent free in my head. Like
Yeah.
you don't need to do it alone. It actually takes a village to get us all to where we need to be.
It really
And
does.
we
And that
forget that.
that takes me back to what we were saying about the baby. I know I said needy, but I'm so glad that you understood where I was coming from. But it's just like you need support. And at some point, we just, like you said, we shift into that very individualistic, self serving mindset where it's like, okay, well, you should have this by now. But if we take it back to that same concept that I am just a living, breathing human being who needs support and needs community, period, I think that's one of the big things missing from just everything, our society right now.
Okay, so yes, sometimes we have to work. Sometimes it's a worth thing where we don't know how to pause,
Mm,
and they often intersect.
yeah.
So, how do we even tell the difference
Mm,
of like, am I doing this out of trying to chase my worth?
mm,
Or am I doing this out of the fact that I fucking have to? Like, if I could choose not to do it, I would choose not to do it. But
yeah.
sometimes we do have choices and we still say fuck it and go burn the candle, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we even?
Yeah. Yeah. No, great question. Great question. Um, to be absolutely honest, that's one of the things that I am still working on learning because I know that I mentioned work being one of those ways in which I've had to deconstruct. That also comes into not just what's possible as far as the kind of work industry, but also how my day to day work life actually looks. Because we are very much taught to chase the 40-hour work week, that 9 to 5 office job, like that's the dream.
Well, but that's, I think that was my point that I was trying to make. Even though you're not working the same jobs, you're still taking the generational belief that you have
You
to work
are, you
harder,
are,
faster, stronger,
yes,
whatever, into this. Okay, if I'm not going to do McDonald's or the librarian or the teaching, how
yeah,
do I take this thing that I know into
yeah,
the PR world and
right.
use it there?
How do I take it here for me into the remote entrepreneur, online freelancer? Dear God, because trust me, it's there. Yes, so that was one of the things that I definitely had to work to unlearn. And in the beginning, it just was what it was. I labeled myself a hard worker and I knew I was a hard worker, but I knew that a lot of it came from trying to prove my worth. And I think you gave me some really interesting questions to think about, which really dug deep. I I am phenomenal at getting jobs. I'm going to toot my own horn because I know how to see exactly what you need and I know how to show you that I'm exactly that thing. And being a multi-passionate, multi-hyphenate, I know a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of stuff. I'm good at a lot of stuff. I'm a manifesting generator, so I learn fast, hella fast. So if you need somebody to do a job, trust me, I promise you, I got you. So I would go into a job and I would be hella lit up and I would take on more work and I would do more than I actually was expected of me. And eventually I would just burn myself out. And I would just get to a point where I was like, you know what? I'm really exhausted. I don't like this job anymore. I hate it. I can't do it anymore. And once that fire dies,
It's
it's
gone.
over.
It's gone. Forget it.
It's
Like,
over.
you gotta find a way to light that fire while it's dying, or else
Yes.
you will
Yes.
never
Yes.
fucking light it back.
Yeah,
I can relate.
it completely extinguishes, like it never existed. And I'm telling you, like I had so many patterns where that was the case. I would do a job and the amount of time that I could stay in that job got shorter and shorter and shorter. Like I when I got to the point where I could only stay in the job for about a year, I knew it was gonna be a problem because then it became 6 months and then became 3 months. And I was like, okay, this isn't gonna work.
But you're not even staying in long enough to get the health insurance.
Right,
What's the deal?
right. I'm like, I'm the kind of person that you bring in when you just need an overhaul or a project done and then I'm out. And corporate America doesn't work like that. But coming into remote work, I was doing pretty much the same thing. And it was weird because I'm in a situation where I can control my schedule. I got into this because I was like, I can't do the 40-hour work week, the 9 to 5, working for someone every single day, having to explain why I need time off, having to get time off approved. That's stupid to me. I'm like, I'm a fucking human being with needs. And I was like, I can't do this. So going into my own work, nothing changed. I followed the same structure because that's what I needed. And I was like, oh shit, I'm still working Monday through Friday from whatever time to whatever time. And it's like, there's not really a time construct because now you're working for yourself at home. You're always
You're
available.
working while watching TV.
I'm like, I could work on this project at 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever, who cares, you know? So then it was just, it was kind of like just this thing that kept going. And it was a lot. One of the things I learned about myself was that I never had boundaries in my life. I didn't really have values, not that I knew about. And when you're that kind of person who is a huge overworker, overachiever, you're very much a people pleaser. You're looking for all of your validation outside of yourself because you've been taught that your self worth is based on what other people decide it is. And that's ultimately what I eventually realized getting to that point. And I was like, damn, I cannot keep working like this. I was getting older and I'm like, I cannot operate the same way I did as I did in college, because I think back on how I operated in college. I'm like, there is no way. How did I go to school and do an internship and go to work? And then after work, I went to the computer lab and did my art projects. I'm like, what?
And
How?
then you had time to party. It's like,
What? And I went to parties.
I'm here like, no, no, no. Pick
Absolutely
three.
not. Absolutely not.
Pick three and cancel one of those three.
Absolutely not. Yes. That has definitely been a journey. So I think that goes back to when I say the during, because I haven't gotten to some ideal there place. But also, like you noted, where I am now is my after moment that I used to dream of. Where I am now, I have freedom. You know, I still work. I mean, idealistically, I would like to not work at all. But right now I work. And thing is, I love the work that I do. I have so much freedom in the work that I do. I have so much space in the work that I do. The people I work with, it's so different. You know, I think I was trying to recall how I got here, but realistically, it's one of those moments where it's small steps over time. And you might think it's not working or changing, but it is. And then you open your eyes one day and it's like, honoring where you are and allowing yourself to celebrate here right now instead of constantly keep going, because we could just keep going, but we're never going to realize how far we've come if we don't stop and celebrate it, you know?
Oof. No, you and I, we need at least like 10 more episodes. But yes, we've talked about work and this idea, right, of just needed to prove ourselves. But there's another part of that conundrum that we haven't touched on, which is the rest part. And I
Yeah.
don't want to leave this episode hanging without touching on rest. So, rest.
Yeah.
What is that, and how have you reframe, befriended, reconnected with that long lost friend
Oh
of
my
yours?
gosh. Oh my gosh. Let me just say that if there are randomly any young children who still get daily naps, baby, enjoy your daily naps, okay? Enjoy the
Please.
hell out of them. Random. These very advanced COVID children are listening to podcasts.
Please get bored. Forget about life and just look at the
Yes.
ceiling.
Gosh. I think that I feel like this could go for anyone in the global majority, but I know especially in the Black community, rest is just like this ethereal concept. There is just so much belief around having to earn rest, having to work so hard to maybe get it, you know, to maybe convince other people that you deserve it and you need it and you're not lazy. Lord Jesus. Anyways, so rest has been something that I've been working on for years. I think that also ties into the freedom aspect. Freedom is definitely one of my core values, and it's something that I work on daily. There's so many conditioned beliefs around having to just earn your worth, which I think is just kind of like a, thread through everything I've been sharing. I will say that over the years, having been trying to, do more as far as it comes to rest, this past December I was forced to rest. I had to have a very immediate and unexpected minor surgery, and it was terrible. It was excruciating, and it was something that literally just kind of came out of nowhere. But I let me just tell you, I had to drive myself to the emergency room late one night. It was probably like a day or two after Christmas, and I go to the emergency room. I am in the worst pain of my life, and they literally, I knew that what I was going through was serious because when I got there, the emergency room was packed and I got seen before like most of those people. So when I go in there, and they're like, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm like 12. I'm like, this is a 12, maybe 15. And, I'm just crying. And it's like, I'm not even just actively bawling. My body is in so much pain, it's just crying. So they literally had to give me an oral pain medicine, an antibiotic, double dose of morphine. They had to give me a local anesthetic, inject me with a syringe, and they had to give me numbing cream on site, just to tell you how much pain I was in.
Jeez.
And on top of that, I still felt everything. And that's just like to tell you like how terrible everything was. So basically, They told me I had to rest. I had at least a 2 week recovery. And even if I tried to fight it, I wouldn't have been able to because my body had just gone through something so freaking traumatic that I was exhausted.
Yeah.
And the medicine I was on just knocked me out. So I was forced to rest for like
Like a
2 weeks.
literal
Literally.
pause. Like,
Literally. And it's like what they say when they're like, listen to your body or else it's going to make you listen to it.
uh-huh. Yeah.
But I literally had to like sit my ass down and rest. And that's what I did. So for 2 weeks, I let myself rest. I let people take care of me. And it was amazing. Like on the other side of things, it was amazing. But what it also did was that it helped me kick off this intentional period of resting. I always wanted to follow seasonal living, which I try to do, but this was winter time and my body is just like, no, it's winter. We need to hibernate. We need to rest. I was like, okay, shoot, after you just screamed at me, say less, you know? So I literally spent the rest of winter actually letting myself rest. And I feel like that can be hard to tell a lot of people to do, but I feel like it's really hard to tell people of color to do that as well. So I really hope that you don't have to go through that kind of experience. And I will honestly say I had the quote unquote privilege of being forced to rest, but it really helped me to actually sit down and learn how to listen to my body, to listen and say, you know what, I'm tired. And then also listen to the part of me that says, yeah, but you need to keep working. Yeah, but you haven't worked enough. Yeah, but you just woke up like 2 hours ago. Why are you tired? And I'm like,
Yeah.
you know what? You're tired. I hear you. Let's go sit down. Let's go sit down. Let's go lay down for a little bit. And it was also this exercise and just doing that and just listening to my body and not constantly questioning what it knew. And I really spent the rest of the winter exploring that way. And I'm so grateful that I was able to do that, and but also like the people around me. And I'm not gonna say like it was the easiest thing because my mom's black, so it's like you don't just lay your ass around all day. So I also had to work with that. But the thing is that I was at a point where my inner voice that advocated for my inner child was stronger and louder. I think that's like a really big thing too. That I know we didn't kind of touch on that, but I started advocating for my inner child a lot more, and the part of me that needed things, like the part of my body that was like I need rest, I looked at it like my inner like 7, 8 year old, and I was like, you know what, this child has no one to advocate for her. I'm gonna advocate for her. So if I have to argue with somebody, I will. She gonna get her rest today, you know. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of been my most recent journey that's been the most impactful for me, and it's one that I still am working on today, and I'm also still battling it, because at the same time I have questions and I'm like, bitch, why are you so tired? Like, do we need to go to the doctor? Like, what is wrong with you? And
Yeah.
then
There's a
sometimes I'm
balance,
like,
right?
yeah, there's definitely a balance. Like, you can't just like sleep all day. And at the same time I'm like, you know what, when I gave myself that rest, when we kind of came into the spring, my body was ready for it. I was energized. My mind was more prepared for it. And I was like, oh, you really were just going through your winter and you really just needed rest. That's interesting.
What I'm hearing throughout our conversation is self-awareness is key. Like you gotta start a conversation with yourself, with your body, with your desires, with your emotions. Like that's your map. Without that, you can't figure out what it is that you need. And then it's a nuance work. Literally, self development and self growth is fucking nuance work.
It is.
Because it's, yes, I want to do all of these things, and maybe I don't have the resources right now. Okay, so where in the middle, where is the intersection? What's that first step? What's that prototype that I can build? And then build from there.
Yeah.
And it takes so much. But I really appreciate that you are healthy and that surgery went well and that you were able to take that time to rest and whatnot, because not everybody can.
Exactly.
For some people, 2 weeks of rest means homelessness.
Yes.
And so it does take a fucking village, and it does take an overhaul of systems for us to be able to get to the point where we are all like able to listen to what we need and get it.
Yeah.
And also it's beautiful when you can find tiny ways of rebelling and taking it.
Yeah.
Like in your case was actually taking those 2 weeks and advocating with your mom for your 7-year-old self part that was expressing pain. For some other people, it might be fucking hitting snooze once before going into the 3 jobs that they have. For other
Yeah,
people, it might be like locking themselves in the bathroom after a shower so that the kids are not like, bringing the house down. But it's
I
it's
bet.
this reimagination of how you can make shit happen where you are.
Yeah,
Because sometimes it's easy to daydream of the perfect world where everything is perfect, and if we want to stop, life stops and we stop with it, and we can sit down and enjoy the breeze, and we feel like we're in this beautiful commercial or whatever. But in reality, sometimes we want to stop and shit happens. You do have to make ends meet, you have people to take care of, you have to cook dinner or what have you. And so it's like reimagining how can you get even an inch of that feeling that you're craving within your current existence, I guess.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I absolutely agree. And what was coming up for me when you just said that is how important it is to ask for support and community. And I know that that's not always easy. Literally, when you said all of that, I thought of three specific people in my life. I thought of my mom. My mom, like I said, works a manufacturing job. My mom works from like 4:30 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon, right? I'm like, that is work. That's some different kind of work that I'm not willing to do, right? But then I think of my sister. She has 3 kids and she's pregnant. And I'm like, yeah, like 2 weeks of rest, she's probably gonna struggle with that. And then I think about my friend who's a single mom of 3. She recently got COVID and she was stressed out the whole time because she had no idea what to do with her kids. And I'm just like, girl, it just made me think about how important it is to have that community aspect. I know that's one of the things that we kind of kept talking about, but also I know how hard it is to be able to ask for help, and then also know that there are people who are willing to help you and capable of helping you. Because I thought for her mom stepped in to watch her kids for her, and I'm like, good, good. But also I'm like, I'm here, I don't mind watching your kids. And even with my sister, I'm like, girl, you need to rest, I'll come watch your kids, like,
Yeah.
yeah. But anyways.
Whew. Okay. We are going to make an intentional choice to wrap this episode up here. I mean, I'm enjoying this so much, but for the sake of time and also for the self-centered reason that I'm going to invite you to this podcast again in the near future anyways.
Absolutely.
We're just going to stop here and give ourselves the pleasure also of resting. Because as 2 manifesting generators, when we sit down and talk about shit that is very important for us and it lights us up, we could be here for 3 days and forget to pee and eat and drink water. So we're gonna be our inner adults.
Yeah.
And with that, I just
Perfect
want to say,
examples.
just perfect. That's it. That's a good joke. I don't know if perfect, but today we're choosing to embody the example. Thank you so much for coming
Absolutely.
onto this episode. It's always great. But before I let you go, this is like how we close this interviews right now. So it's called the Genies Lamp, and it's 3 questions, rapid fire.
Okay.
The first one is going to be a wish for the future, and for you it is, what do you hope to create or experience in this new chapter of your life?
Ooh. International travel, love, and I want some kind of, like some deep soul stirring lit up like retreat.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Next one is a gift for the past. What would you tell that younger version of yourself who was afraid and felt she had to do everything?
Ooh. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna cry. I would hug her. I feel like she needs a hug. I'm literally picturing, there's a picture of myself as a kid. I don't know how old I was, maybe like 6 or 7. And I'm like standing in my grandma's kitchen holding a doll. That's what I'm thinking of. I would hug her, and I feel myself getting hugged right now, so I'm crying. I would just tell her that I love her. She's amazing. She's phenomenal. She is so different and unique. Like, she's just so beyond anything anyone ever could have imagined. To remind her that she is literally one in billions, like the only person like her, and that she's amazing just as she is. She doesn't have to prove anything to anybody. And she's probably like, what? Who's this crazy lady?
Grandma, there's a stranger in the kitchen.
Right? Lock your doors. Yeah. You know, I watch a lot of Mr. Rogers, and it literally heals my inner child, but I feel like I hear myself saying to her, he always says, you don't have to do anything sensational to be liked. I like you just the way you are. And he has this whole song where he's just like, it's you I like. And it's like, it's not the way you do your hair, it's not the clothes you wear, it's you I like just the way you are. And I'm just like, baby, I like you just the way you are.
Oh, I'm gonna send you a song right after this.
Okay.
But there's one more wish on the lamp.
My gosh, look at your poll.
So the next one is an answer for the present, and I thought it would be really cool to just pull cards from this
Ooh.
game that I love. It's called We're Not Really Strangers. Let's see what comes out. Has a stranger ever changed your life?
Ooh, wow. Maybe. Wow, that's such an interesting question. And it's so amazing. I'm surprised at all of the flashes of stranger interactions I'm having in my head. So, okay. Maybe not like change my life, but definitely impactful. I have two. One's good, one's bad. One is like a childhood traumatic memory, but the good one actually just happened yesterday. I went to a store. I won't name it because of boycotting reasons, so do not cancel me. I had to, okay, but
We have a trend here. I talked about Blake Lively on your episode.
that's so funny. You're right, you did. I promise you, I only did it because I had to. But I went and I was walking into the store, and this woman, she was going to her car, and she had a cart full of stuff, and she had a stack of, I don't know, plastic shells or something, and she was trying to put it in her car, and I just offered her help. And I was really amazed at myself that I did it. And we were literally working together and cooperating, trying to get this thing into her car. And then she had these very amazed reactions. She's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you thought of that. And then she was like, okay, rock star. And then I just said bye and I went on about my day. But I mean, that like literally just like lit me up like so much. And that rock star stuck with me.
Well, I mean, I guess she knew your pronouns because she was close.
That's what I said. When you read it back to me, I was like, oh, okay, I see you coming back into play.
Damn. Well, everyone, I hope you like this episode.
I hope so too.
This is what we have for you. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Ronnie, one more time for bringing your rock starness, multi-hyphenate passion person into the space. Like, I love you so much, and I'm like so grateful for this shit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I appreciate you so much for doing what you're doing, for having me here. Also noting that Nane was my first guest on my show. It's so amazing that we got to do this for each other, but also that we are supporting each other like on these journeys, because it's so good to have like a really good friend do your first interview with. And I love you so much. I appreciate you. I'm so glad we crossed paths, and thank you for seeing me. Like, that means so much. Like, seriously, thank you.
As always, take what you need, leave what you don't, and make this journey entirely yours. If something in this episode resonated, please let me know. Leave a review, share your thoughts in the comments, or DM me over at the Free Genies Project on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, adios.